I'm Nova Han. I'm a creative director for music festivals, stage shows, concerts, and immersive experiences around the world. My work has been seen by hundreds of thousands at festivals like Coachella, Electric Forest, Burning Man, and Firefly. I've worked with artists like Deadmau5, Bass Nectar, and the String Cheese Incident. My job has me searching the globe to discover the industry's best artists in installations, performance, movement, set design, costumes, and emerging technologies to create some of the world's greatest live entertainment experiences. Audiences see the awe-inspiring spectacle of the final product, but they have no idea what it takes to get there. We the Creators explores the lives of the artists behind the magic, what drives them to do what they do, the sacrifices they've made, and the pain they've overcome to make art at any cost. Behind every great artist is an even greater story. This is We the Creators. Hey, and welcome to another We the Creators, where our mission is to showcase the incredible artists in live events and the epic journeys it took them to get there. Today, we're with my friend and prolific artist, Morgan Sorne. Sorne is an award-winning multidisciplinary visual artist, musician, actor, and filmmaker. His works have been showcased at the prestigious Texas Biennial. He was awarded Avante Gaurd Artist of the Year at South by Southwest, sold out 2 nights at Sundance Festival last year, performed and toured all around the world, and is now illustrating a book for Saul Williams, which is mother effing badass. His artistry spans across multiple disciplines that center around narrative experiences that blur the lines between a music venue, a theater venue, and an art venue. When I think of Sorne, I put him on this pedestal of what I believe a true artist is. It's just somebody who lays it all on the line and is unrelenting with their vision. His works are visceral, raw, soul excavating, and just unabashedly him. So this is the world of Sorne. Hello.
Hey.
Hi, friend.
Hello.
I love that closing image of you of like, I'm like, who is that little boy? It's so sweet.
You can guess him, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us today. Yeah, I have to be honest, when I was kind of thinking about the show and preparing for it, I was having a hard time trying to understand just where I wanted to go with it today. In light of everything that's happening in the world with the lockdown and the protests, It's just, it's hard to look at yourself, or it's just like, it's hard to not look at yourself, let's say, amidst all of that and wonder, like, why the heck is any of this important? Like, right. What are we even doing? Like, why does this matter?
Yes.
And, I think it's something that we kind of go through frequently as an artist, are these questions of like, what am I doing? Why is it important? Is this just for me? Is it for me to just get my jollies off? Or am I actually doing something here? Am I contributing? Does this matter or make a difference? So, I really struggled with that today. At first I was like, let me try to think of all these cool questions to ask Sorne. And really, I just don't think there's anything more relevant than like, why do you make art and why is that important, especially in today's climate?
Yeah. I think the short answer, so much comes up. For me, art was about taking responsibility for processing, cleaning out the closet, so to speak. So when I think about the current events, and I think about how, for me in my whole life, I really have believed that good art comes from a need, and the countless number of examples of art, people who took their suffering and alchemized it into something that was like honey for the rest of us to appreciate. It's a leading by example in a way that's humble and out of a need to do it. You know, so much of the work in my life has been to process thoughts, to process histories. You know, the racism that we've inherited, the environmental debt, the financial debt that we've inherited from generations past. We can either ignore it and leave it up there, or we can take it and turn it into something. By processing and working with it, I think I've seen it give courage to other people to do it in their own way. So I make art for that reason. I make art because I need to make it. I make it because there's so much to be discovered in what has come before. And gosh, as we speak, you know, in watching the protest this last week and being moved to tears, it completely re-energized the work that I've been doing with Saul, with Martin Luther King, to be illustrating that work. I mean, he digs deep. He goes to the heart of all of these issues when it comes to the colonialization of Africa. You know, the dilemma we face with the technology that we use every day coming from these places that are being exploited. He's doing it in a way that's creative and magical, but also hard hitting. And for me, that kind of artistry is what, I mean, I look at that, it's a no-brainer. Like, where do I sign up? How do I serve this? You know? So what better time than now to make art? As long as it is this thing of, we have to process, we have to just keep creating. That's what comes to mind, you know, just right off the bat. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's, and there comes a level of maturity too with that. I was thinking about this today, actually, how I remember in my younger years, how I did a lot of things to be likable, you know, to be accepted, to be likable, to look cool, whatever, you know. And then I got older and rebelled against that and didn't give a fuck if anybody liked me, you know, and really held my ground. And then I kind of came out of that full circle where I realized, like, God, both ways were so selfish. You know, there's such a selfish way of being. And now everything is really geared towards, like, how do I serve? And it's not with the intention of, like, because I want to be, you know, applauded. Right. It's like, it's truly like coming from this place of, like, how do I genuinely serve and give? Because I'm, you know, I'm already in this place of self-assuredness. I don't need those accolades. It's really like what needs to happen is, how do we actually continue to allow people, hold their hands through their own kind of trials and tribulations, through their own enlightenment, through their own, you know, opening up. And so,
no doubt,
you know, I really believe that great art, you can feel it as an audience member. You can feel the difference when an artist is there for themselves so that they are receiving the accolades, or when they are genuinely giving of themselves to the people around them, to their audience. It is a palpable difference of alchemic magic.
Yes.
Is when it comes from that root, you know?
I agree with you. You know, it's like doing the homework, and all what you're saying, it's like we have to get some things out of the way in our system. We have to work through processes of our own development. And then, in fact, I had a friend who was an animator for Disney once say, he's like, we've all gone through our Joseph Campbell hero journey where we've slayed the dragon, we've faced our demons, and now we're on the kindred quest. And when he said that, it was like a bolt of lightning. It was like, when I came to LA 5 years ago, it was that thing. I'm here to give. I want to share stories. And I think that's the time we're at. Honestly, I really do. Here's what I've figured out in my journey. What have you figured out? And how can our shared experiences further elevate and inspire?
Right. Absolutely. And coming from, like, the most genuine, authentic place of that, it's one thing to have that idea, right? I feel like that's what, like, corporate culture is like in a lot of ways. They're like, well, we need a mission statement. And you're just like, no, bro, you need to be the mission. You know, it's, it's like genuinely connecting to those messages.
No doubt.
and that's what I love about you as an artist. And that's why like, whenever I talk about you as an artist, I always say, like, God, Morgan is one of the true artists that I know, because, what I mean by that is, like, you always just lay it all out on the line. Like, you have done the work to excavate your soul, like, reveal all of the nasty, creepy crawlies inside. You've served your heart on a platter, and then you heal yourself up and stitch yourself up just so that you could do it all over again. And that's really the plight of the artist, right? Is that we do the work to just tear ourselves open and heal it up.
No doubt.
And actually, I find that that's really interesting, because in some ways that way of being is this antithesis to the way that people view people who have gone through art school and gotten an MFA. There's this, like, really salty kind of idea that if you go to art school, it's going to crush all of your personal freedom of expression,
Right.
which you don't lack at all.
Right.
So and then they always kind of, like, downplay and shun it for boxing people in, but you don't live in a box. And so I guess what I'm curious to know, just talking about your kind of fine art side of things, what did you learn? What was, like, one of your greatest lessons for going to art school?
Yes. Well, I really believe that we only box ourselves in. And I say that thinking about reflecting on my art schooling, because when I went into the BFA program at Florida State, I had already taught myself how to draw. I could do photorealism and all of that stuff. And the program that I went into was more of an entrepreneurial program, where they basically gave you a studio and they said, good luck, we'll tell you when you're, doing something wrong. And a lot of kids in that program floundered, because they were like, wait, I want to learn how to render a form, or I'm looking for technical skills. But for me, it was perfect, because it gave me the freedom to realize visions and ideas and narratives that I had been, rolling around since I was in high school. So when I think back, the thing that I learned more than anything else was to do homework and to dig deeper. When I was inspired by something, the best advice that I got from professors distilled down to essentially the message was, dig deeper. Here's some other people to look at. Oh, I see. That's really great. I like what you're doing there. Here's 10 different artists to look at. You look there and you realize where those artists were inspired, and you can keep going back and back and back in time. And for me, I think the core of my conviction was, I'm interested in the etymology of things. I'm interested in the root of meaning. Where did that come from? How did you get to that? And constantly asking that question drove me to keep digging. And that's something that perhaps, at least I'll say in pop culture, we don't get to see behind the curtains with that process. But when you think of anybody that looks like they're doing something flawlessly, there's tens of thousands of hours behind all of that in terms of the homework, doing the homework of research, not just practice. So, yeah, I had one professor, Jim Roche, who's like a father figure for me. He was my mentor for years and still is. He and his wife are both phenomenal artists, and they are constantly checking in, and I'm sharing work with them, and they're still working artists too. And then the other was this woman, Phyllis Strauss, who was a civil rights attorney and then retired and got a master's in sculpture. And that woman made me feel like I could walk on water. It's like I'd go into her office and she would just empower me every time. But she would also say, dig deeper. So I think that's the big takeaway from any schooling was it inspired that discipline of doing the homework.
Yeah.
And by doing the homework, that keeps us active. It's like that part to me is the joy. The real process of learning and discovery is what leads to these byproducts, which are paintings or songs or performances, So,
yeah. And I love your works. They're, again, like, it's all of them are so different, and you have this amazing ability to humanize things so deeply. Like, you have your emotional EQ is so high. Like, you're able to access parts of you that honestly would terrify people. to witness in themselves.
Oh,
but you
boy.
have this beautiful ability to kind of hold people's hands through it and walk with them through catharsis, which is so important.
That means a lot to hear. That feels like a core instinct, you know. It's like even as a child, that was innate there, kind of like pitch, being able to sing a C, just from being able to hear it within myself, you know. And so it felt to me like with that responsibility, it was more of an invitation to take that gift that life gave me and pay it forward. You know, to be able to make all of it feel like invitation. When I think about the divisiveness of our current events, the biggest thing that comes to mind is we need to be supportive, we need to listen, and we need to be able to just take responsibility. You're like, okay, where do we go from here? Let's do it together, as opposed to continuing to get distracted on, you know, it's like learning to dance with a partner. You know, when you're learning that dance, it's going to be awkward. It's going to be embarrassing at times, but the more we can just be like, I got you, we're going to get there. Oh man. Same thing with the whole voice lesson stuff. When I help people to find their voices, I'm not a trained singer, but I have these skill sets that I've developed over years of just doing it. Let's share that and make it fun and gentle and inviting.
I can't believe that you're not a trained singer. It's like your pitch and your range is otherworldly, ethereal, alien. It's amazing. It's
well, and on that note, going back to the homework stuff, it's like if you watch something like Ken Burns Jazz, right? You realize by the stories about Charlie Parker and all of these greats, they spent so many hours just with that instrument. And the same can be said for me. It's like I sat here, and House of Stone for me was literally a self-therapy, self-help process where I was in my little studio with very humble recording capabilities, and I was just doing take after take until I could hit the note that felt right. And listening back and cringing and I'm trying to do.
Did you hear it in your head first, or was it something that you discovered through a feeling?
The note. Well, that's an interesting one because it goes, it's hand in hand. It's like, to me, the sound is the feeling. And so there are specific moments in songs, like in Firstborn, there's a piece towards the end where it's these high kind of shrill, what have I done? I slipped my father's throat. And I remember at the time just thinking about the pain that I could feel when I listened to Billie Holiday singing, or the anger that I felt when Nina Simone would sing, beautifully so, you know. And so it was like, in this instance, I need to hone in on that feeling of, I don't know what's the word, terror?
I like how you just kind of glazed over the verse when you're like, you know, that feeling when you're like, what have I done? I just slit my father's throat. I mean, I guess it would be that feeling.
Yeah. No
you just kind of said that under your breath, but you know, maybe that was the feeling.
Right. Well, see, I processed that now, so it doesn't even affect me. No, but yeah. I mean, it's like really sitting with the emotion of what that would mean. You know, in that narrative, it was this thing of pulling up the suppression of emotion. You know, that particular character was all about discipline, self-discipline, the repression of emotion, to the point where they're just completely cold-blooded, lacking any empathy. And in that particular song was this awakening moment. I'm thinking, okay, if I'm gonna do this and it's gonna be real and authentic, I have to go there emotionally. What would that feel like? Okay. And I can't be satisfied until I have a take that when I listen back, it gives me the chills and makes me tear up.
Wow. Yeah. So for people who don't know your work, House of Stone yet, you know, and also I wanted to say that this is a show where you guys can ask questions. So just throw them up in the comments and we'll come back to them at the end. But for people who haven't don't know what House of Stone is, like, and I actually feel badly asking you this because I do know about House of Stone, and it would be like, hey, just, I don't know, just give me the elevator pitch for Game of Thrones, and you're like, fuck, there's so much. But if you were to briefly summarize House of Stone for people watching, like, what would you say about it?
House of Stone is a story that parallels the current events. It could be past, or it could be future, it could be right now. A story of 5 brothers and sisters who are processing the relationship they had with their murdered father as they're preparing to defend their house against an outside invading force. That's the gist of it. This particular family that the story surrounds are villains in their world. So it would be like looking at life through the eyes of the Hussein family, right? Or Al-Qaeda, or any of the people that we have deemed villains in the world. The idea was to try to look at life through the eyes of the villain. Each of these characters have their plight, their baggage. They're imperfect. They're very dark. They're also very beautiful. They're very fragile. And House of Stone essentially was an opera that followed each of their stories during the course of events that span a particular amount of time, leading up to this final fight.
Yeah. I mean, and the storylines, from what we've discussed and what I've listened to on your like 6 albums of just epic journeying, really toggling the line between like the idea of what is bad and what is good, and how we kind of maneuver through those spaces. Yes. And like, and our own sense of good and evil and where we fall along that line. And, I think just knowing you and how deeply this work has been for you, like what are some of the tragedies that you were trying to understand and cope with by making this piece?
Right. Well, the 2 things that inspired the work originally were when September 11th, on that day, watching the Twin Towers fall. And right around that time, my grandfather died suddenly from a heart attack. And he was a real pivotal character for my mother and her siblings and all of the drama around that whole history that I had learned about as a child. So it was a combination of processing what I was witnessing happen with my mother and her siblings, my own immediate family, my brothers and sister and father, and then the current events of the world, and seeing the histories of America, the histories of world politics, and asking the question why all the while, and pulling from so much symbolism, because I feel like you can see all of these parallels. And the idea for me was, rather than hit it right on the nose, take it and let's tell it through story, because it helps to process what's going on too. I grew up on Star Wars and as a child, and Star Trek. And so the idea of world building was a wonderful way of, I don't even like using the word escaping, but rather just relating to the world that we find ourselves in. And I felt like my hope was to create a work that did that magically, but also didn't pull any punches. So these stories are very much like in the Oedipus Rex Greek tragedy level of intensity, and the familial relations, the fallout.
And like 9/11, you were in your older years, but correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like just from some of the conversations that we've had, like you wrote some of these things out as a child, right?
Yeah.
And was this your way of like trying to understand the world around you?
I think in part, yes. The work really began when I was my first year in high school. I was wanting to create. I had a series of narratives and I'd been writing stories since I was a child. And that's the other part of all of this. When I really started pursuing art as a primary thing, I went back to a tape of me at 2 singing, and I thought about how I used to cut out little characters in paper and have them as my imaginary friends.
Wow.
So I was like, all right, I'm going to do that, and that's what feels good and true. So with House of Stone, it's actually one of a few stories, and it's the smaller of these narratives, and they're massive. So my hope in my life is that I can realize the rest of these through music in the same way and visuality. But really, when I thought about deepening the work. How can this become more relatable? How can it become more authentic? It was, well, I can pull from what I know. And what I know is the relationships I have with my family, the way I feel about the world right now, the way my friends feel about the world right now.
Yeah.
And let that inform the work.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, going back to what we were saying before about just like how art can be alchemical, and we can really use it to just transmute these tragedies and shift them into these modalities of healing and empowerment and understanding. In what ways, I guess, have you tried to do this with your work?
House of Stone was, gosh, I think a 15-year cycle where every time I'd come back to these personality types, there were really, archetypes within myself that it was I kept touching on it. I remember towards the end of working on it, I had a dream that my grandfather came to me in this river waist deep, and he just let out this deep sigh, and he dissolved into the water as this blue light. And I remember crying, like feeling like, okay, his spirit finally found rest. And in a way, it was like, okay, maybe I've worked through a lot of the anger and the pain and the fear that came with all this stuff. I did it. But then at the same time around that work, I was also doing things where I would start with a phrase and I would outline it line by line until it formed a creature, focusing less on the end result, kind of going the opposite, where with House of Stone, I had this fully mapped out trajectory, going the other direction and just drawing without any purpose other than to circle this word. And that kind of meditative act also was really nice for pulling out, little mental knots. So I did a whole series of those for a show in Houston, an art show. And it was the words from one of the songs that became these, what looked like running wolves, but also looked like topographic maps, which I like too. The topography, right? The topography of our psyche, the origins of words, like how words can accrue meaning. Things like that. It's like playing with multiple levels of symbolism to hold a question. What is it? What is this about?
Yeah, and in some of your works, you have those like word songs also. What does that mean?
Same idea. And that one was inspired. I had read this book called Flash of the Spirit by Robert Farris Thompson, where he traces Western culture all the way back into tribes like the Yoruba, the Mende, and the Dogon. And in Haiti, specifically, the Vodun, or as we would call it, voodoo tradition, is a beautiful amalgamation, a synthesis of West African mysticism, Catholic iconography, numerology, astrology, and they're pulling all of these pieces into this beautiful, spiritually charged practice. And so the first time I saw a veve drawing, which is where they take cornmeal or bone marrow powdered form, and they draw these pictograms on the ground as prayers, it really resonated with me. That's not my culture. And so for me, I remember at the time, I was like, I'm specifically not going to recreate any of this work, but it's inspiring me to develop my own iconography. And so the song drawings were just that. It was this thing of singing while drawing and just letting both processes just go. In a similar sort of a state where I'm just in a state of meditation or prayer or quiet, inner stillness while this is happening, and just letting this stuff flow. And by the end of doing each one of these, I remember always feeling so good. It was like, that alleviated some kind of pressure here. And by nature, I'm a very anxious person. So a lot of this stuff was just about giving myself a mental massage, or like this thing here, behind me was one of those.
Yeah.
I'm excited about these because it's denying the words. When I'm writing, it's literal wordplay that I'm doing, where if it's a thought process I'm having, I'm just writing it out on paper or on canvas.
What do you mean it's denying the words? What is that?
I'll say it's releasing the words. That might be a better way to put it. It's like I'm writing down a journal entry in this form over and over and over on top of each previous line. So it's indiscernible. You can't read it. And what's left.
Oh, so that's actually writing back there?
Yes.
Just layers and layers and layers of you actually writing sentences.
Exactly.
Wow.
I did this for a performance where I was in the center of the canvas, and whatever was on my mind at that moment, I was just writing it just to release it. And there's something for those of us who have done like Julia Cameron's Artist Way.
Yeah, I bitch about that all the time. Actually, I want to know what is the point of these morning pages, and actually maybe explain to people what morning pages are. But to me, it just sounds like a pain in the ass. But but that's because I haven't tried it.
Well, hey, what I will say is that it's not for everybody. I'm not here trying to promote like this is a solution for all of us. However, I begrudgingly started doing it. And Julia Cameron is a writer who made a book, for those of us who don't know, called The Artist's Way. And a girlfriend gave it to me years ago when I was having a real hard time, just feeling really blocked. And one of her therapies to help unblock creative expression was to do morning pages, where you wake up before you do anything else and you pull out your journal and you write 3 pages of whatever is on your mind. You don't judge it. You don't try to edit it. You just let it out. And then you close the book and you move on with your day. So I did that. And I did it for like a year and a half. And what started happening was I was getting out all of this mental blockage. Mm-hmm. And in a way, it's in the spirit of meditation, and that what we're doing is pulling the stones of thought out of the way so that river of thought can flow. Mm-hmm. And what I took away from that, because I don't necessarily do the morning pages, was I just turned it into my artistry, where it evolved into this. I have now drawings that look like this, and they're beautiful because you can see. And for me, I realized that in order to really do it, I had to write in cursive. The flow of the cursive was a lot better for me to just let my thoughts out. Mm-hmm. So that's, it worked for me. I mean, my first art show that got me into the Texas Biennial in 2009 came out of the practice of doing the morning pages. And I'll admit to you, I didn't finish the book. I mean, I got so far with it, but then I just didn't need it anymore. So, it's like, it's a walking stick, like so many things. And it happened to work for me.
If you had one word that described the painting, like the essence of what you were writing in that painting behind you, what was it?
Whew. Yearning. I remember what I was writing about for sure, and there was a yearning at that moment. That's the word for that one. And in fact, what I'll do, I have a journal of these now where I'll do that. I'll do my diary entry in that form, but then on the back, I'll just write 1 or 2 words, just sort of as the title for the thing. Like, this is what this was.
Right.
But yeah. And I think the idea of letting the words go, not revisiting them is a wonderful form of release. It's like, I don't remember what I wrote. I remember the spirit of it, but I want to let it go.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and I think that that's like something that I really respect about you is you're such an empath. You're really like, I've watched you over the years really pick up on the energies around you. You have a side of you that's, a clairvoyant side of ways, and really just like not regurgitating, but like, you know what I mean? Like you're pulling it out through your body and disseminating it.
Absolutely.
In a lot of ways.
Yes.
And I love how, like, in going back to House of Stone, how you really, I feel like you've really paid homage to the native people of our land, of America, without explicitly being Native American. I feel like there is an homage to, the people that were the originators of this land.
Right.
I actually want to play a little clip from one of your videos, Omnipotent, with the sound, because I feel like it would be a shame to like not let people to hear it.
Okay. aesthetic and all of it was something that, I think about the art of listening. And as a kid, where we grew up was near burial ground for the Seminole, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a series of dreams for years where I'd wake up and see through the walls of the house to these First Nations men, blue, like you would think of like a ghost or a spirit, holding space where now there's giant trees. And they were looking at us, neither friendly or malevolent, just, why are you here? I remember that being the question, who are you, why are you here? And me as a kid looking back saying, we mean you no harm. My family and I are living here peacefully. Please, I felt like I was treating with them. And there's a beautiful piece at Battery Park's, I think it's the Museum of the Native American. And it's this sort of cutaway, and it's like, you have street level New York with the buildings, and then there's the subway, there's concrete, and there's like, piping and all this. And underneath all of that is the earth and the spirits of the earth who can't get out. And it was done by a Native American artist. I can't remember what tribe he was from, but it really struck me. And I feel like going back to the pitch thing, there's a lot to be taken from the ground where it speaks. And there are still places in America where you can hear the ground speak. Those stories are still very much alive. The stories of genocide, the stories of storytelling, the mythology, the beauty and the tragedy is also very much still a part of it. And so maybe in a way it was tuning into some of that. The costuming in that video in particular, there's so much going on. Like the bottling of tears is a ritual that I think it's called the Rudali. They're professional mourners who would be hired for the pharaoh. And in Egypt, that whole thing was going, they would bottle their tears so that the pharaoh had an elixir for the afterlife.
Wow, professional mourners.
Yeah, and that's still a tradition that exists in certain parts of the Middle East today, as far as I remember. It's been a while since I've read about that. The Rudali. And I like that idea of bottling the tears, channeling suffering so that we can water the flowers of potential for a new day. And then, there's a lot of Abrahamic kind of symbolism in that thing. That thing I'm wearing is like the coat of colors from the Bible that Joseph was given by his father, like this idea of entitlement or right. The sacrifice of the child coming also from the Old Testament. Again, it's like it's taking all this stuff that's been given to me. It's the box of symbolism that I grew up with, and it's taking it and processing it. The sacrifice of the firstborn, that being such an archetypal, heavy piece throughout multiple cultures.
Yeah.
Right. And so much of the work also it serves as a reminder that this stuff is still playing out to this very day. We have to listen. We have to listen. We have to keep asking questions. We have to keep thinking critically. These were a lot of the things that were going on as I was taking the symbolisms and bringing them into a current context.
It's interesting hearing you talk about these ancient traditions, that I feel it makes me starkly aware, actually, that we don't have modalities of having conversation around death, around mourning, around afterlife.
It's true.
It's not embedded into our American culture. And I think that's one of the things that has, we're really depraved of.
Truly.
It's like our human experience is such a broad spectrum experience, and it's all of those emotions that makes it exquisite and wonderful and beautiful. And yet we've kind of categorized all of these feelings of like sad as like these bad feelings, and we put all this shame on it. And there's all this shame on it. And I don't, it's funny because knowing you, I don't consider you to be a dark figure, but I do see you as being transient between, this light and dark space, that you're actively creating this bridge so that people can have access to these feelings that are shunned in American
Yes,
culture.
absolutely. There's nothing to be afraid of. Be ever vigilant, but do not be afraid. That's what comes to mind. And I think my desire as a human has been to round out my life experience where I can walk into that dark space just as easily as I can walk into that light space. And what a joy it is to be able to do that. Why don't you try it too? There's nothing to be afraid of. Just be vigilant, be aware, ask questions, check your six.
Yeah.
And so thinking about ritual and culture of America, I mean, that's a big part of it too. It's like, I'm like a white kid in this country that really had no culture. It's like there was Christianity and some ideas about my Sicilian and Scandinavian heritage, but what is that? We have a few holidays, but yeah, the shame around birth, sex, and death is very much a thing that I want to work through lovingly and plug in the cords where they've been pulled out. And this is the stuff that makes us alive. There's a beautiful thing I was watching last night about the Jizo statues in Japan.
I don't know about them.
I didn't either. Oh, it's so beautiful. A particular prefecture in Japan where a lot of children died because of the harsh winters. And so they would take the little Jizo statues and dress them in the child's clothing as a way to help their spirit to cross over the river. And there's thousands of them all over the country. But there's a particular temple in, oh boy, I can't remember the name of the prefecture, but there's like hundreds of these adorned with the clothing of the children that died and little foods for them and things. And I was just crying. It's like, this is the stuff of life, oh my God. I want more of that. I want to create that. I want to help others to find that in their own lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to take this time to open it up for people that are watching. If you all have any questions for Sorne, this is a live show, so let's interact. I haven't seen a question come through yet, so don't make us wait for too long, y'all. Send us something in the meantime.
On the topic of death, there's a wonderful book by this guy, Martin Proctel, called The Smell of Rain on Dust. Oh, it's so great. And he talks about grief, and grief is praise for those who we've lost. It's a wonderful piece on...
Say that again. Grief is praise for those who've lost.
Grief is a form of praise for those that we have lost. So when we're grieving a lost love or a deceased person in our lives, it's like, no, let the tears flow, because this is the way that we honor the love that we have for them. A friend of mine gave it to me, who's a death doula, and he himself, I think, lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico somewhere, and his whole life's work is about reconnecting to these old lost traditions. But the book is called The Smell of Rain on Dust, and I highly recommend it. It's an easy read. It's not that big. But I think, he gets into how, as an American, he was, I can't cry at my own mother's funeral. What? And went down to Mexico and lived with, forgive me if I'm, misquoting here, but I believe he went down to a village that had the last group of Mayan shamans who were practicing in the old ways before they were eradicated. And he escaped with his life. He lost his daughter and his wife. And I'm playing a game of telephone with the details of the story.
Sure.
But he came back to the States with all this information and saw how dramatically different our process for death was. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's so unceremonial in a lot of ways, and it really does not. It doesn't pay homage.
Yes.
In the ways that we know other cultures can pay homage.
No doubt.
Matt said, we do have a question, and it's, Sorne, tell us a little bit about your process. Your brain is so multifaceted. I don't understand how you move from different mediums so fluidly.
I mean,
I don't know either.
Yeah, that's not for everybody either. I think that, I know for me, it's like when I was trying to decide, pick a direction and go, I just couldn't. It was drawing and singing and all of it just was all so much like a body of water to compartmentalize that really felt counterintuitive to my natural state. So all I'm doing is allowing myself permission to operate at those levels. And some days I'm like, you know what, today I'm going to draw, or today I'm going to work in the garden. But I think the multifaceted thing really is just like, if I was burnt out recording a song, I could go in and paint something and do something else to let that creative muscle rest while I flex this other one, you know? So I think of it like a workout routine, and not overthinking it, just throwing the damn ball, you know, like, and that's what these drawings are about too. Is I'm not trying to make a perfect circle or anything for that matter. So like, I'm just going to do the process of marking the page and see what happens, you know? So I think that's the biggest one, is like, don't overthink it. Just, you know, allow yourself to sink into that state of play.
Right. We have one more question and then we're going to maybe round it out. But
okay.
Ariana asks, I noted that you mentioned the Vives. Have you done any research on or made any observations on their geometric connection to the flower of life, web of weird?
Oh.
Futhark alphabet and the Kabbalah?
Well, I have not. Is the short answer. I have not done that research. However, that would be a wonderful thing to learn about if you had anything that you might find on the subject. So much of those drawings are pulling from, numerology, astrology, and African mysticism. And I know there's a lot of juicy stuff around the Kabbalah too. I invite you to do that digging and shoot me a message with anything you find.
Yeah.
That's the fun part of that. It is a lot of it too. It's like, I got sparked, I did a thing, and now why don't you see what you can do with it? What do you find?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to start to round this out, and just given the times, I've had this closing quote on my email for years now, which is, the role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible. And that's by Tony Cade Bambara.
I like that.
And just, kind of given our current climate, what would be one way that you'd encourage people to get their message out there?
What comes to my mind is to listen. Yeah, I think the Dalai Lama said the key to enlightenment in our age is to be listeners. And when I think about the people that influenced me in my life, what they did was tirelessly pursue their craft, even if no one else saw it or heard it. And they did it to the day they died. Or if they're still alive, they're just doing it. They're doing it, you know. James Earl Jones, whenever he won the Academy Award for his role in that film, well, they asked him, he's like, I did it for me. I did that role for me. So to get your message out there, I think right now the most important thing would be to listen keenly with all of your senses to everything that's going on. Ask questions, continue to hold those questions without answers, and keep creating from that place of questioning. And I think by way of that, the kinetic snowball effect begins to happen, and that's what I was doing. I was making this work in a bedroom for years, and I have a friend come over who would hear, oh my gosh, I got to play this for somebody. Okay, here. And then that led to shows, and that led to this and that, So don't hold back either. I remember that was advice from a mentor. If you hold back, you stay back. Don't hold back in your creative process. Be humble about it. Always ask questions. Always be open to reinventing, reinterpreting your stuff. But keep creating.
Yeah. Sage advice. Well, right on. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you everybody for watching. If you're watching this now or later, please know that we, like many, are part of an industry that has been deeply affected by COVID-19. So not having the events where we normally share our works has had a devastating impact on the artists and the communities that we give to. So just one way that you can be a part of our quest to support the arts and to keep sharing these works is to spread the word, Subscribe to our YouTube, follow our pages, share it with friends. I know you hate hearing those things, but you have limitless likes, so don't be stingy now. And if you're interested in following Morgan's artistic journey, please follow him on Instagram and Facebook. It really does mean a lot to us.
Yeah.
He's Morgan Sorne, Sorne. And we're here every Wednesday. So join us next week as we'll bring a new artist to you every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Until then, thank you. Stay safe, be kind, love boldly, listen, senses up. Y'all.
Senses up.
This week. Bye.